In America today, the cost of living is often explained with numbers, inflation rates, housing prices, wages, and interest rates. These figures dominate headlines, debates, and political speeches. But for millions of Americans, the real cost of living is not fully captured by statistics. It is felt in shorter days, smaller lives, and constant mental pressure. In time that disappears, in choices that never feel simple, in futures that quietly shrink into the next paycheck. This is not a story about financial collapse. It is a story about adaptation, about how ordinary people adjust, compromise, and survive inside an economy that demands more while giving less room to breathe. To understand what is happening, we have to look beyond prices. We have to look at how life itself is changing. Because the true cost of living in America today is not just measured in dollars, it is measured in time, energy, security, and the futures people are slowly forced to give up. In America today, the cost of living is usually measured in dollars. Rent, groceries, gas, healthcare. These numbers dominate headlines and political debates. But there is another cost quietly rising alongside them, one that rarely appears in charts or official reports: time. For millions of Americans, life no longer feels expensive only because of money, but because of how much time it consumes just to stay afloat. Time that used to belong to family, rest, or reflection is now spent working, commuting, and juggling responsibilities. The economy did not simply raise prices, it stretched the day until there was nothing left. Working 2 jobs was once considered temporary, something done during a rough patch. Today it has become a structural reality. Many people hold a primary job that barely covers essentials, then add a second job not to build wealth, but to prevent falling behind. Evenings and weekends are no longer personal time. They are extensions of the workday, absorbed by extra shifts, gig platforms, or freelance tasks that feel less like ambition and more like survival. At the same time, the search for affordable housing has quietly stolen hours from daily life. As rents rise in urban centers, people move farther away, trading proximity for lower costs. The result is longer commutes, earlier mornings, and later nights. Hours are lost sitting in traffic or on crowded trains, time that is unpaid and unrecoverable. Cheaper housing often comes with an invisible surcharge, paid not in dollars, but in exhaustion. Side hustles are often celebrated as symbols of independence and flexibility. But for many Americans, they are no longer optional. They exist not to fund dreams, but to close financial gaps. Driving, delivering, selling, or freelancing happens after full workdays, not because people want to work more, but because the math leaves no alternative. The line between work and life has blurred to the point where rest feels irresponsible. As time disappears, something deeper erodes. Family dinners become rare. Friendships fade through missed calls and postponed plans. Moments that once allowed people to think long-term, to plan, to imagine a different future, are replaced by constant urgency. Life becomes a sequence of short-term decisions made under pressure, with no space to pause. This is the hidden cost of living in America today. Not just higher prices, but a shrinking sense of time ownership. People are not simply working harder. They are surrendering their hours, their evenings, and their mental space just to maintain stability. And because time is not listed on a bill or deducted from a paycheck, this loss often goes unnoticed, even as it reshapes everyday life. Time inflation does not announce itself loudly. It happens gradually, quietly, until people realize that surviving the economy now requires more than money. It requires giving up the very thing that makes life feel like more than survival. Shrinkflation is often discussed as a problem of products. Smaller packages, lighter portions, the same price for less. But in America today, shrinkflation no longer stops at store shelves. It has quietly expanded into everyday life itself. Life is getting smaller. For many Americans, survival is still technically possible. Bills are paid, food is on the table, and routines continue. But beneath the surface, something is shrinking. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually enough to feel normal. Portions are reduced, spaces tighten, and experiences disappear one by one. The economy has not collapsed, it has compressed. Food is often the first place people adjust. Portions become smaller, meals simpler, variety reduced. Eating is no longer about enjoyment or nutrition alone, but efficiency. People plan meals around price per calorie, not preference. Restaurants become rare occasions, then disappear entirely. What was once casual becomes calculated. Living space follows the same pattern. Apartments get smaller, rooms serve multiple purposes. Privacy becomes a luxury. As housing costs rise, people adapt by downsizing, sharing, or staying longer in places that no longer fit their lives. The physical footprint of daily living contracts, and with it, a sense of comfort and control. Social life shrinks next, not because people stop wanting connection, but because connection has a cost. Meeting friends means spending money. Attending events requires planning, transportation, and time off work. Slowly, invitations are declined, then stopped altogether. Social calendars empty, not from lack of relationships, but from financial caution. This reduction happens quietly. There is no single breaking point, no dramatic moment where life suddenly feels unlivable. Instead, people adjust, then adjust again. Each compromise feels temporary, but together they form a new baseline, a life that functions but no longer expands. From the outside, it looks like stability. People are still working, still paying rent, still moving forward, but the quality of that movement has changed. Joy becomes conditional, comfort becomes minimal, the margin for spontaneity disappears. This is modern poverty in its most subtle form. Not total collapse, but gradual contraction, a lifestyle that shrinks just enough to avoid crisis, while slowly eroding well-being. Shrinkflation is no longer just about less product for the same price. It is about less life for the same effort. And because this process is slow and normalized, it often goes unnoticed. But over time, the cost becomes clear, not in bank statements, but in the quiet absence of space, pleasure, and connection that once made everyday life feel whole. In America today, social isolation is often framed as a personal issue. People are told they are too busy, too anxious, or too introverted. But for a growing number of Americans, isolation is not a personality trait, it is a financial decision. As the cost of living rises, social life becomes one of the easiest expenses to cut. Going out means spending money. Dating means spending money. Even simple gatherings come with hidden costs. Transportation, food, time off work, and the expectation to participate. Slowly, people begin to opt out, not because they want to be alone, but because they cannot afford connection. At first, the changes are subtle. One declined invitation, one postponed plan, a promise to meet sometime soon. Over time, those small decisions form a pattern. Friends stop asking, relationships weaken, calendars empty, isolation sets in quietly, disguised as responsibility. Dating in particular becomes financially exhausting. What was once a normal part of adult life now feels like a luxury. Dinners, drinks, apps, and transportation add up quickly. For many, the risk of spending money without certainty feels irresponsible. As a result, romantic life is delayed, minimized, or abandoned altogether. Loneliness becomes an acceptable trade-off for financial stability. Social withdrawal also affects family relationships. Traveling to see relatives becomes less frequent. Celebrations are shortened or skipped. Presence is replaced with messages and brief calls. Physical connection is replaced by digital substitutes, not because they are preferred, but because they are cheaper. This kind of isolation carries a psychological cost. Humans are not designed to live in financial survival mode while remaining socially disconnected. Over time, the absence of shared experiences erodes emotional resilience. Stress increases. Motivation declines. Life feels narrower, quieter, and heavier. From the outside, this behavior looks like independence. People appear disciplined, focused, and self-contained, but beneath that image is a reality shaped by economic pressure. Social isolation is not chosen for peace, it is chosen for affordability. This is one of the least visible effects of rising living costs. It does not appear in inflation reports or employment data, yet it reshapes daily life in profound ways. When connection becomes expensive, isolation becomes rational. And when isolation becomes normal, the cost of living is no longer measured only in money. It is measured in distance, silence, and the slow disappearance of shared human moments. In America today, financial pressure is no longer limited to major life choices. It has moved into the smallest decisions of everyday life. What to eat, when to buy gas, which bill to pay first. Decisions that once required little thought now carry weight, consequences, and anxiety. This constant calculation exhausts people before the day even begins. From the moment they wake up, Americans are forced to negotiate with their finances. Breakfast is not chosen by appetite, but by cost. Transportation decisions are shaped by fuel prices and remaining balance. Even routine purchases require mental effort. Cooking at home or buying food is no longer a simple choice. Cooking saves money, but costs time and energy. Buying food saves time, but creates guilt and financial stress. There is no winning option, only trade-offs. Each decision demands attention, and attention is a limited resource. The same pressure applies to timing. Should gas be purchased now or later in hopes of a lower price? Should a bill be paid immediately or delayed to cover something more urgent? These are not strategic financial plans. They are survival decisions made under uncertainty. Over time, this process wears people down. The brain remains in a constant state of alert, scanning for risks and compromises. There is no mental rest. Even moments of pause are filled with quiet calculations. The mind never fully powers down. This fatigue has consequences beyond stress. Decision quality declines. People become more reactive, more impatient, and less capable of long-term thinking. Small mistakes feel catastrophic because there is no margin for error. One wrong choice can disrupt the entire month. What makes this exhaustion particularly damaging is that it is invisible. People still function, they still show up to work, they still meet expectations, but they do so while mentally depleted. Productivity becomes mechanical, motivation erodes. This is the decision fatigue economy, an environment where economic pressure does not just reduce spending power, but drains cognitive energy. The cost of living is no longer paid only with money, but with constant attention and emotional labor. By the time the workday begins, many Americans are already tired, not from physical effort, but from hours of unseen decision-making. And when every small choice feels heavy, even stability becomes exhausting to maintain. In America today, debt no longer announces itself as a crisis. It does not arrive with panic or desperation. Instead, it enters quietly, disguised as convenience, flexibility, and modern financial management. Small debts have become normal, and that normality is what makes them dangerous. Groceries can now be paid later. Meals can be split into installments. Subscriptions, essentials, and everyday expenses are increasingly placed on credit. These are not luxury purchases. They are basic costs of living, stretched across time because monthly income no longer aligns with monthly expenses. For many Americans, this is not reckless behavior. It is adaptation. Cash flow has become irregular, while bills remain fixed. Paychecks arrive on schedules that do not match the rhythm of modern life. Credit fills the gaps, smoothing over short-term shortages while quietly building long-term pressure. The danger lies in how invisible this process feels. Each individual decision seems manageable. A small charge here, a delayed payment there. None of it feels like debt in the traditional sense. There is no dramatic borrowing, no single moment of excess, just a steady accumulation of obligations that blend into daily routine. Over time, these small debts stack on top of one another. Minimum payments multiply. Future income is pre-committed. Financial flexibility shrinks. People begin each month already behind, not because they overspent, but because yesterday's survival is financed by tomorrow's paycheck. This normalization changes behavior. Spending feels less tangible. The boundary between earned money and borrowed money blurs. People lose a clear sense of what they actually have versus what they owe. Financial planning becomes reactive, focused on managing payments rather than building stability. What makes this particularly dangerous is the absence of warning signs. There is no sudden collapse. Life continues. People work, pay, and repeat. But beneath the surface, pressure builds. One unexpected expense, one missed paycheck, or one increase in interest can trigger a cascade. Quiet debt normalization is a time bomb not because of its size, but because of its reach. It touches everyday life, not extreme cases. It spreads slowly, unnoticed, until it feels unavoidable. This is not a story of irresponsibility. It is a story of misalignment, an economy where the structure of income no longer matches the structure of living. And when debt becomes the bridge between the two, the cost of living is no longer just higher. It becomes delayed, deferred, and dangerously persistent. In America, mobility has long been treated as a solution. If a place becomes too expensive, people are told to move, find a cheaper city, relocate to another state, start over somewhere new. Mobility is framed as freedom. Today, that freedom comes with a penalty. Moving is no longer a simple reset. It has become expensive, complicated, and emotionally draining. High deposits, upfront rent, moving costs, and transportation expenses create a financial barrier before the first day even begins. The promise of a cheaper life often requires money that people no longer have. Even when housing appears more affordable on paper, the transition carries hidden costs. Vehicles must be maintained or replaced. Commutes change. Access to services becomes uncertain. uncertain. What looks cheaper in one category often becomes more expensive in another. The savings are delayed while the costs are immediate. Social networks are another unseen casualty. Moving means losing proximity to family, friends, and informal support systems. Childcare help disappears. Emergency backups vanish. What remains is isolation at a time when financial stress is already high. Starting over requires not just money, but resilience. Because of these barriers, many people stay where they are, even when they know the situation is unsustainable. Rent rises faster than income, job opportunities stagnate, quality of life declines. Yet the cost of leaving feels greater than the cost of staying, at least in the short term. This creates a form of economic paralysis. People are not choosing stability, they are choosing immobility. The inability to move becomes a constraint that locks them into shrinking options and rising pressure. Mobility penalty changes how people think about opportunity. It discourages risk. It delays change. It turns relocation from a strategy into a gamble. And when the gamble feels too dangerous, people stop playing altogether. This is one of the least discussed aspects of the modern cost of living. The problem is not only that life is expensive, it is that escape routes are expensive too. When moving becomes a luxury, flexibility disappears. And when flexibility disappears, people remain trapped in places they know are no longer working, not because they lack ambition, but because they lack the financial breathing room required to move forward. In America today, financial stability is no longer defined by comfort. It is defined by distance from collapse. Even people who appear stable on paper often feel one mistake away from falling. The numbers may look acceptable, income covers expenses, debt is managed, savings exist, yet beneath that surface is a constant awareness that stability is fragile. One accident, one layoff, one family emergency. Any of these can undo years of effort. This sense of vulnerability changes how people live. Decisions are made defensively, risks are avoided, opportunities are passed over. People focus less on growth and more on containment. The goal is no longer progress, but damage control. What makes this feeling especially heavy is its unpredictability. Emergencies do not follow budgets or schedules. Health issues arrive without warning. Jobs disappear suddenly. Family responsibilities shift overnight. The safety net that once absorbed these shocks now feels thin, delayed, or unreliable. As a result, anxiety becomes a permanent background presence. Even during moments of relative calm, people remain mentally braced for impact. Relaxation feels unsafe. Planning feels fragile. Hope is cautious. This psychological pressure carries real costs. Sleep suffers. Concentration declines. Relationships strain under constant stress. People may still function, but they do so with diminished emotional reserves. Stability becomes something to guard, not enjoy. From the outside, these individuals are often labeled responsible and disciplined, but responsibility under constant threat is exhausting. Living without a sense of safety turns every success into something temporary, something that can be taken away. This is the vanishing safety net feeling, an invisible burden created not by immediate crisis, but by the absence of reliable protection. It is a form of insecurity that exists even in moments of stability. And while it may not show up in financial statements, it shapes behavior, limits possibility, and quietly raises the true cost of living. Because a life lived without safety is not just expensive in money, it is expensive in peace of mind. In the past, everyday life in America was filled with small moments of relief. Not luxuries, not major rewards, but simple pleasures woven into the routine. A coffee from a favorite shop, a movie on a random weeknight, a short road trip just to clear the mind. These moments did not define success, but they made life feel human. Today, those small joys feel different. They no longer feel casual, they feel calculated. As the cost of living rises, even minor pleasures require justification. A cup of coffee is no longer just coffee, it is a line item. A night at the movies is no longer entertainment, it is a budget decision. A weekend drive becomes a question of gas prices, wear on the car, and time away from work. Nothing is spontaneous. Everything must be weighed. This shift quietly transforms how people experience daily life. Joy becomes conditional. It is postponed, minimized, or replaced with cheaper alternatives that rarely offer the same relief. People tell themselves they will enjoy life later when things are more stable, but stability keeps moving further away. As small pleasures disappear, life becomes increasingly functional. Days are organized around efficiency, productivity, and cost control. Meals are eaten quickly. Free time is spent recovering, not enjoying. Rest becomes another task on the list, something to manage rather than experience. This Dysfunctional living takes a psychological toll. Without small breaks of enjoyment, stress accumulates. There is no release valve. Work flows into personal time, and personal time offers little restoration. Over time, exhaustion becomes normal. Burnout spreads quietly, not from working too much alone, but from living without relief. What makes this loss particularly damaging is how invisible it is. No one declares that joy has become unaffordable. It simply fades. People adapt without noticing what they have given up. They become efficient at surviving, but disconnected from pleasure. From the outside, nothing appears wrong. People still wake up, go to work, and meet their responsibilities. But inside, something essential is missing. The moments that once made effort feel worthwhile are gone. The disappearance of small joys does not feel like a crisis. It feels like adulthood, responsibility, maturity. But over time, it creates a life that sustains the body while draining the spirit. A life that works, but does not inspire. And when joy becomes a luxury rather than a habit, burnout is no longer an exception. It becomes a shared experience, quietly shaping how millions of Americans move through their days.